A big question on a lot of Formula One fans' minds is, will Max Verstappen dominate the field again here in the upcoming 2024 F1 World Championship? To help me discuss from the Telegraaf is Erik van Haren. For those of you who don't know, Erik is the Dutch journalist who regularly covers Max Verstappen, travels to all the races, and if you're a Verstappen fan, I mean, Erik is the guy you want to be plugged in with because he gets all the info on Max. Erik, thanks very much for taking the time to do this. How are you?
Yes, thanks for having me and for the nice introduction. I'm very well. I have to say I'm a little bit start to feel for the season to start, but I'm quite happy that I'm now at home for a few weeks in a row. My girlfriend is happy with that as well, for now at least. So, it will be a long season this year. So, I think all the Formula One journalists, but also, of course, mechanics, drivers, team members, all the team members, I think they were happy they have some rest maybe where they can. So, for me, it's the same.
I figured we should probably do this now before the season starts because, like you said, I know how busy you get when the season's in full motion. I mean, Erik, you're joining us all the way from the Netherlands, a place I've always wanted to visit. I mean, I was going to go last year for the Dutch Grand Prix. I had about seven races on the calendar that I had to report for, so be in person at, but I had to choose between the Dutch Grand Prix in Silverstone, and at the end of the day, I ended up going to the British Grand Prix. But the Dutch Grand Prix is a race that it looks like a lot of fun.
Go this year, yeah, or at least next year, because we don't know if it will be on the calendar after 25. But it's amazing what they did there, and it's of course it's easy to get there with the train. The atmosphere is just mental.
Yeah,
but
awesome.
It's really well organized. I think a lot of people in the Netherlands always said, "Oh, it's never going to happen in Zandvoort. It's impossible to have it there." And if you see what the organization did there, and of course the popularity of Verstappen is still growing, it seems. So it's really nice to have an own Grand Prix like in the Netherlands.
Well, today we're here to talk about Max, and the guy just doesn't stop winning, Erik. I mean, just this past weekend, I believe he won the 24-hour virtual race with his esports team. It's like Red Line esports team. He was driving a Mercedes AMG GT3.
Yeah, Max in a Mercedes. So I think that's the only time he does that. But it's if you speak with him, it's funny or it's nice if you chat about sim racing. Of course, for a lot of people, maybe they think, okay, that's not too interesting. But if you speak with Max about that, the excitement from him and how happy he is to talk about it and how serious he is, it's quite incredible to see. And that's the real expert, but also the real fan of the sport. And he's so serious with it that Team Redline is not just a hobby. It's like a second job for him. So and he wants to evolve. He wants to have his own GT team and have a place for a sim racer to have an actual spot in a real racing team. So a lot of things in the future for him on that side as well, I think.
Yeah, I remember last year talking to him at the launch in New York, and I had asked him because I think it might have been Helmut Marko had said that he had put a sim setup in his private jet. So I asked him about it, and he said, no. He's like, I put a sim setup in my motorhome when I go to the European events, and like he takes it very seriously, like you said. I mean, like when he's done, at the track on a Friday, Saturday, whatever, he goes back to his motorhome when in Europe, and he was saying that he jumps on the sim. Like after a full day in an F1 car, he goes back and starts hauling ass in a simulator. I mean,
after a race in Europe, a few hours later, when we are still working at the track, he's already at home in the sim, and sometimes he watches the F1 races back as well, maybe on Sunday evening or Monday morning. But the sim it's for him, I think. a little bit a hobby. So he thinks it's fun, but also, of course, you maybe evolve as a driver as well in some point. But it's nice how good he is in that as well. But nice to see that someone has his own thing besides Formula One. Of course, it's a racing thing, but it's not the same as F1, of course.
Yeah, good point. Verstappen coming off a dominant season in 2023, one in which he won 19 of the 22 races. I mean, just a staggering number. I mean, since we just don't know what is going to happen this upcoming season, I figured we'd discuss 3 reasons why Verstappen won't dominate the 2024 season, and one reason why he will. I'll kick this one off because I've been kind of thinking this over the winter months because I haven't had a lot to do, Eric. So for me, I think my first thought on all of it was, Red Bull wouldn't be able to make the same jump with the car as they did last season. I mean, in 2023, I think they had less wind tunnel time and CFD time than others. Plus, they had the 10% penalty for going over the budget cap, and they were able to turn out an incredible car. Now, for this season, again, less wind tunnel time, less CFD tunnel time than everyone else, but I just don't think they will be able to make the same leap in performance or really extend their dominance in races. I mean, since Red Bull never really deviated from their car concept starting back in 2022, I think Adrian Newey and his team have really sucked everything out of these regulations. I think that is one of the greatest cars I've ever seen, and I couldn't imagine there is much left to improve upon. Now, granted, they had front tire warm-up issues a bit in qualifying, but I think that car was generally built for Grand Prix races. I mean, struggled a bit with certain street tracks, but other than that, that car was dominant across the board, paired with an incredible talent like Verstappen. Now, if we use another team like Mercedes, for example, I mean, they had one concept that they started with in 2022 with that zero pod idea. Then they evolved that for the beginning of the 2023 season, but then 7 races into the season, they radically overhauled their car concept. So Mercedes hasn't really sat with the regulation in just one concept, where Red Bull, they really have. They've evolved their philosophy over, the two, coming into this third year. And I don't think this regulation is complicated enough to really find monumental gains once you've sort of reached the peak with these regulations. That's my first reason why I don't see Verstappen dominating is the fact that they've just really gotten close to just tapping out on what these regulations can really provide. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. That was one of my reasons as well, that of course the rules are staying the same. If you see the step like a team like McLaren made from day one to the last day of last season, quite significant. I think Ferrari was strong the last couple of races as well, because of course on qualifying mode they were quite strong, but then on Sundays they are lacking a bit of pace. But now some races like in Vegas, Leclerc was quite competitive, especially on the medium tire. So that's a good one. I think if I can give one of my reasons, I think all the reasons you can make up, but it's, I think, almost impossible to be as dominant as Red Bull, as Verstappen was last year, to copy that another year, because Verstappen was flawless. I think you have to think really hard to name one big mistake he made. I think he didn't make one big mistake. A mistake maybe he made in Miami qualifying, but then a day later he won the race. Maybe that was the big start of a big rhythm and the difference with his teammate. So of course you can have some bad luck as well, as a team and as a driver. So and what I said first, I think the gap will be, if the rules are staying the same like now, and in 25 it will be inevitable that the teams like McLaren, Ferrari, maybe Mercedes will come closer to the most dominant team, like we saw in the Mercedes area as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point that you make. I mean, Miami when I go back and I take a look at Miami, I mean coming in, like I thought Sergio Perez was going to have a shot at maybe battling for a championship here. I mean, he was what did he finish? Second in Bahrain. He won in Saudi Arabia. Then he was fifth in Australia. Then he won in Baku, and I believe that put him just a few points.
I think 3 points, yeah. But
Yeah.
in Baku, he was really strong because he was winning the sprint race, but Verstappen had some bad luck on Sunday during the race with the pit stop, and then you had the safety car after the crash of De Vries, the other Dutchman at the time. But he was really strong, and then I think he really believed that he could attack Verstappen. But the funny thing is, if you look back at the press conference after that race, if you read the quotes of Max, he was just saying, okay, I know this kind of tracks doesn't suit me that well, and there will be now coming more normal tracks or more race tracks with more fast corners and stuff, and that's more my style. And then he delivered. So it was not like an athlete who said, okay, season long, there's a long season left and I will make sure I win. No, he was like thinking already about the tracks coming. And of course he proved himself right, because after that from Miami onwards, he won 10 in a row. So yeah, it was like, I think he never feared Checo, and also not after Baku, because he's too confident in his own qualities.
Yeah, and I think in Azerbaijan, I think in Baku, he really, from what I could see, kind of looked like he really figured the tire out and how, like the RB19 and the tire kind of work together. And I think
he did a lot of things at the steering wheel as well, with setup and changing suspension and stuff like that. So he said that he learned a lot during that race. So maybe when you are in his footsteps, you learn more in race weekends where it doesn't go that ideal 100% like you want. But he learned a lot of that weekend. That's for sure.
Yeah, because then once we got into Miami, I mean, it was hot, like searing heat. Like it was so hot there that weekend. And then trying to, I guess, coax the tires, get them underneath you, get them working. And I thought like Verstappen in Miami was on the weaker strategy too, in terms of tires. And he still ended up just, coming through the field and then obviously winning, beating Sergio, who is supposedly great at managing tires. At least he has been in the past from what I've seen. But yeah, I thought after Miami, that's in Sergio, and would be my second thing, would be, Perez, when the car just got away from him and, he really lost his confidence and just took a very large chunk of the season for him to regain that confidence, where when we got to the end of the season in Abu Dhabi, I think he still wasn't even 100% certain with this car. But now coming into 2024, let's say he's worked hard in the off season, really tried to change his style. And I know it's not an easy thing to do, and has worked hard on the engineering side to find ways of getting Red Bull's car philosophy sort of more on his side. And what happens if he starts taking points away from Max within the races? I'd said this before we recorded, we could maybe make an argument. Well, not an argument. We could maybe say would be like Hamilton versus Rosberg situation, where, one takes points away from the other, and this thing sort of comes down to the final few races. I mean, obviously it's Max. I mean, he's incredible. That would be impossible. Well, not impossible, but that would be hard for Sergio to do. But I think that another reason why Max maybe not would be dominant in 2024 is the fact that Sergio kind of just figures this thing out and gives him a battle.
Yeah. I think for him, the mental game is maybe the most important, because, of course, we start a little bit the same with maybe Australia, Jeddah, that kind of tracks. Baku is now later in the season, but maybe suits Checo good, but but let's say after 4 or 5 races, he's close to Verstappen like it was last year. Then I think it's very important for him to stay calm and stay with both feet on the ground. And for him, maybe it's more difficult because he has a big country behind him. People are so He's so popular in Mexico. And also I spoke with Alain Prost, I think it was before the Mexican Grand Prix last year. And he said, after the Miami race in that month, because we had a few weeks no races with Imola cancelled, there were some interviews with his father as well from Checo. He said, this can be like Senna Prost in the past. It's stupid to say that kind of things, but now because you're competing against a 3-time world champion now, just stay who you are. Just try to win some races, and then let's see what's happening. And let's see, maybe Verstappen has some bad luck, maybe has a DNF, a crash. You never know, and then things can happen and can evolve. But I think it's stupid to say things like that at the beginning of the season when a certain Verstappen is your teammate, because I think Verstappen is already very hungry for success, and I think the hunger will be even more if you say things like that, because I think when you read things like that, you will say, okay, let's go, I beat you.
For your second reason why, what would it be?
I think I said a little bit two things. The first thing was, I think it's quite impossible to copy a season like last year, to win like Red Bull 21 out of 22 races. Secondly, I think the other teams who got some beatings at the beginning of the season are more confident now. McLaren, I said after the worst start, of course they had some good steps. Maybe they can extend that steps, like you said as well. They have more wind tunnel time. Ferrari, like I said, maybe now Mercedes with James Allison back as technical director since last year. Of course, the last 2 cars were not with his name, his signature below it. So maybe that can help. And if you are like Red Bull, you are like at a top level already. I think you mentioned it as well. It's quite difficult to make that big steps like a McLaren can or a Mercedes can, because of course their distance to Red Bull is so big. So I think the gaps will be closer, because the rules are staying the same in 24 and in 25.
Yeah, that would be my third one. Is just other teams really catching up, and Mercedes is an interesting one, Eric. I mean, you kind of said it there with James Allison coming back as their technical director, then getting that role extended at the same time. It's one of the puzzling things with Mercedes is the fact that, they're kind of starting from fresh, really, when it comes to this regulation and car concept. We mentioned off the top, they had, their idea in 2022, then they had their other idea in 2023, and then they split that idea of a few races in, and now they have to go in a totally new direction. When we look at what Mercedes could unveil here in the next few weeks, when the covers get pulled back off of these cars for the 2024 season, what do you think the Mercedes is going to look like? Do you think they're going to go with something like an RB19 sort of look to it and head down that road? I would assume so, right?
Yeah, I think you will be stupid if you don't copy anything from the RB19. But it's always easy to say, okay, let's copy the dominant car, because if you copy certain elements of a car, you don't know for sure if it works in your car as well. And of course, I think at Mercedes, they showed in the past they have good people, Toto Wolff, James Allison, and they are all in the team right now as well. So I think it will be good for the sport as well. I don't know how it is with you, but if I write something about Verstappen, of course, it's really popular in the Netherlands. But also, if you write about Toto, if you write about Lewis Hamilton, about George Russell, and that whole 21 rivalry between Red Bull and Mercedes, it still exists because they hate each other. And I'm not exaggerating. I think that's it after 21 and what happened that year, especially after the Silverstone crash with Hamilton and Verstappen. You saw it last year in Hungary as well. At Red Bull, they were so disappointed that Verstappen missed out of pole position in Hungary, and it was not because he missed out of pole position, but that Lewis Hamilton got the pole, I think. And of course, in the first corner on Sunday, Verstappen was already leading the race, but still, that's that there is something there, and that's nice. It's good for the sport because 21 was maybe the best season ever. So yeah, let's hope for the public, for the people who loves to see close racing on and maybe a little bit outside the track as well. That will be that it will come back.
Yeah, and I'm also interested to see what I'm fascinated by McLaren as well. I mean, like you say, you know, with Mercedes, they're always quite popular, very very popular here in Canada and North America, and so too is McLaren, and same with their drivers. I mean, Lando is very popular here, but they're a fascinating team when I take a look at them a little bit closer. Like I'd mentioned with the wind tunnel off the top there, and finally getting some time to have that wind tunnel sort of on site, and how important that is now with this new regulation in Formula One and stuff like that. I'm really curious to see what they can turn out, because I think if Mercedes can't get close to Red Bull this season, I think the other team that's going to get the closest would be McLaren, only because of the jump that they made mid-season this year, and or in 2023, I should say, and the fact that, you know, the technical department that they've created underneath Andreas Stella is really quite interesting. The way they have those three different departments sort of working together, and it really does look like it does work. I really think that's going to be a team for fans to watch for, I think.
Yeah, it's quite a trend you see nowadays in Formula One, that like people with an engineering background are becoming team principal. You see it now with Haas as well recently. So you see it now with, I want to say AlphaTauri with Mackies, but of course they no AlphaTauri anymore this year. But that's a new maybe a new trend. But let's see how that went down. And I think, I don't know how it is with you, Tim, but of course it's easy to make 3 reasons why, but it's also a little bit like, okay, I can imagine that a lot of people hope that. So you are, okay, it can be quite logical as well. And my third reason will be, if the teams are closer to Red Bull, then as a Red Bull, maybe you are making more mistakes as well, because you have more pressure. Maybe not, because I have a lot of faith in the people who work there, and they know how to work under pressure, because they show that in 21 as well. Yeah. But it can be that you make more mistakes, or that sometimes not even a mistake, but that you have to try something with a more aggressive strategy. Maybe sometimes that will work out, maybe sometimes not. But if it's more closer, then maybe you can have a bad strategy. But if they had a bad strategy last year, or maybe not as good as the maximum, then normally they won the race as well. They had one off weekend in Singapore. They were really not good there, but that's only one weekend. But that also show that it's not peanuts. Also not for Red Bull to be at the top level every single weekend. So like a Singapore weekend, it showed if you don't have it right with the setup, even if you are a dominant team, then you can be nowhere in one weekend.
I think you make a great point, because for Red Bull itself, I always kind of look at that team as the aggressor, or the aggressive team on the grid, where they'll take chances with pit stops, they'll take chances with setup, they'll take big risks and stuff. And I think for them, that's the way they go and race, and it's smart because it works for them, right? Like they're naturally aggressive in that manner, where they're not afraid to take a risk, and for the most part, it usually just pays off for them. But putting them under pressure, I don't know. It'd be interesting, because they don't normally make mistakes. So it'd be fascinating to see other teams start to apply some pressure to them in 2024 and seeing what happens. But I think one reason why, Max, could dominate is because he's Max Verstappen. Talented, fast, consistent. His feedback is strong, can adapt to the car quickly. I mean, Eric, at this moment, he just seems he's so in the zone right now. Yeah.
Like I said, it was, of course, you can name 3 reasons why they won't dominate. But of course, it's January, so we don't know. We don't know for sure. No one knows for sure. But if I heard the stories a little bit, of course, Red Bull stopped the development for the 23 car quite early because they have that luxury to focus on the 24 car. And with the Verstappen in absolute top form, I think it will be, and he is so, like, admire is maybe not a good word because I'm not a fan or something, but what I like as a journalist, that he is like a guy, he's always going for the maximum result, and he's really straightforward talking about that as well. And if he has not a good weekend, not a good weekend now means he doesn't win, then the week after he's so on fire. Like, remember Singapore last year, the week after they went to Japan, and of course you had the stories with the front wing adjustment and people saying, okay, that was the reason.
His qualifying in Japan.
And then you see he's going into that weekend with only one thing in his mind, like, okay, I'm not going to win this weekend, I'm going to crush the field.
Yeah.
And then he is there. And also, if he is on a new track like Jeddah 21, you go to Jeddah, it's hot, it's a new race track, it's a street track, it's really dangerous. It's the final week of, it was not the last race, but the week for Abu Dhabi. Yeah. You are fighting with Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion. And the first lap on the Friday during the first practice, he's purple. It's the racecraft of him, and it's unbelievable still, and that's still funny to see. And like last year as well, he was champion in Qatar, so he had a few races left, and then every single weekend he was driving like he had to fight for the championship still. Yep. That's quite. Of course, it for us it maybe seems so easy or so that someone is doing that, but it's not. It's not. And in the on Dutch television as well, sometimes you have the people saying, you cannot say it's boring because it's so great what he's doing. Unbelievable talented, and that's true. But it's not that if you say the one thing, you can't think about the other thing. Of course, I can imagine that people say it's boring. Of course, but you also have to say, I think everyone with normal brains will say that it is so impressive what he is doing. And still, I think even when the championship was finished last year after Qatar, like Vegas was one of the greatest races of the year. So it can be still fascinating, Formula One. It's not that if there's one guy, one team dominating, that it's boring all the time. I think we saw quite good races last year as well.
And some qualifyings too. I mean, Max's qualifying in Monaco, wrestling pole position away from Fernando Alonso in the dying moments in Q3, and I mean, that's one of that sector 3 in Monaco that Max put out. That's got to be one of the greatest sector 3s on that track in the history of the sport, because I mean, he was like 1 inch one way or the other, and that car is going to get rolled up into a ball. But
he had the chicane at the swimming pool there. He crashed there multiple times in the past. And you see in his qualifying that he's touching the wall there. And after that, he was not saying, okay, I was on the limits. Of course, he was on the limit, but he was touching the wall on purpose, so he had more momentum into the chicane. So you think about that. And it was only for pole position in Monaco, and there was already, of course, we already knew at that stage of the season, okay, the chance is quite big that he is going to win. But I think that kind of weekends help for him as well. Okay, you cannot say it's only a dominant car, because it's showing that in Japan, but Monaco, it shows how good of a race driver he is. And also in June and July, I think, all the European races and also Canada, I think there was not a single weekend didn't have rain on Saturday or Sunday, or maybe both. So the circumstances were not easy as well. If you have a dominant car, you just want to have no rain, just dry, easy, predictable. Yep. And every weekend we had something strange with the weather, and still he was winning. So yeah, that was quite impressive as well, I have to say.
Yeah, I remember in Canada for qualifying, it was raining, and some of the onboard camera shots, especially for Verstappen's, like you couldn't see anything. Like there was I don't know how a lot of those drivers were able to keep their cars on the track at that moment, but I mean, his qualifying there in the wet also impressive. just want to get your thoughts on the upcoming season, on what you think this could be like. I mean, it's going to be the longest on record in Formula One history. 24 events. It's a lot. I just, are you going to do all the races? And how difficult is that?
Well, I will skip a few. Also with my situation at home, if I'm not married, so that doesn't cost me a divorce, but will be the same result, I think, if I do 24 races. And I saw last year, sometimes when I work one race from home, I don't want to do that 2 or 3 times in a row, but
right.
Like maybe next year I don't go to Japan and I do China, but I go to the first ones and to Australia and stuff like that. But it will be tough. I think you have, after Singapore in September, you have quite a big break of almost a month. And then you have only you have 2 triple headers with 2 weekends in between with no race. But it will be very, very tough. Like last year, the Vegas Abu Dhabi doubleheader was I like to be in Vegas, but because it was a new event, season was already done. So you have a new event, a lot of stories to make. That was nice. But to be there at 4 a.m. in the 4 a.m. to have free practice 2 finished, it was, as a journalist, it was quite nice, but it was mental for the mechanics and stuff.
Yeah.
So it will be really, really tough. I think it's a little bit more logical, the calendar now. That helps a little bit. But also you have Australia, then a week nothing. You have Japan, week nothing. China, week nothing. Miami, week nothing. So you have to go back, you have to stay there.
So back and forth too.
I'm not staying in there to have holiday or something. So I go back in European time, I think I always think now I don't have to complain that much. I think a lot of people want to do our jobs, I think. And for a lot of people in the paddock, it's way more tough than for us. So, but it will be challenging also for the drivers, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that front, because, I mean, even though, the drivers have to adjust to all these time changes as well, and they're going back and forth at the same time too. So, yeah, it'd be an interesting season to see how it all kind of works out with the travel and how everybody does and how everyone handles it. AlphaTauri announced their rebrand today. It was actually just a few hours ago, from the time of this recording. So, Erik, they're now going to be known as Visa Cash App RB Formula One Team. Do you expect that name to be shortened?
I hope so. Yeah, but I was thinking about like a Red Bull Racing is like officially it's Oracle Red Bull Racing, but no one is. If you speak about it, no one is saying Oracle. So in that perspective, it's quite from a marketing side. I can imagine that you do the sponsor name so dominant. Well, it's only a sponsor name, like Stake F1 as well, the former Alfa Romeo. But yeah, how we going to pronounce it, how to write about it, I have to think about that. And the TV commentators as well, because if you name the whole team name, then there's there's one lap already behind you, and then then you have to say, okay, this happened as well. But it's all marketing, of course, and I can imagine it's the US market. You know way more about that than me, but it's so big. You see, they will. The presentation of the team is in Vegas, I believe. Of course, they will have a lot of publicity, but it's the current time. Yeah, it's like you see it in cycling and stuff. You see it as well, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point, actually, with cycling. Because I saw Nate Saunders, who's a colleague of ours on Twitter. I think he posted that he had heard that it could be shortened, or the team is referring to it as VCarb F1 team. So that would be like Visa Cash App RB F1 team, shortened VCarb. I don't know. You remember like the Racing Bulls? Like, is that still going to be a thing? Like, do we know? Like,
no, I heard because it was like a marketing name or something.
Yeah,
you had to. Yeah, but I heard it was only just an internal working name. So I heard quite soon that it was not to be that name. Well, they proved that, right? So, let's see. I hope for them. It was funny if you see the press release. Peter Bayer, the main director, he was not saying only we focus on developing talents, because they are the sister team of Red Bull, of course, but also that they want to go more for the prizes. So that was quite, of course, every team wants that, but it was quite, you can also can't say that in your press release. So maybe that's interesting. I think they will have more close partnership with Red Bull next year as well. I think the AlphaTauri, the Visa Cash App car for this year will be like normally if you have that connection, like a copy of the RB19, I think, like from the Red Bull car of last year. That will be quite logical, right?
Yeah, for sure. And just they'd be so strong too. And they were supposedly moving closer to the RB facility, Red Bull Racing facilities as well, I believe. But yeah, that, you know, if well, not AlphaTauri anymore. I was about to call them AlphaTauri. The Visa, Cash App, Red Bull Racing F1 team. If you're parented with Red Bull Racing, it would only make sense to have components, or at least have your car look similar to the RB19.
Yeah, but it's a team to watch, right? It's a team to watch because they have a new team principal with Mackey's. They have Ricciardo and Tsunoda, and of course they will go into the season like, okay, maybe I can have a shot at Red Bull after this season, or maybe already during the season if Perez is not performing well. Of course, his contract is expiring after 24. What happens then? For Ricciardo, he always said it's his main goal to be back at Red Bull, so from 25 onwards. So it will be interesting to see. And of course we had Liam Lawson last year, we did a tremendous job as well, knocking on the door. So one of the teams to watch, and I think that's quite interesting to see the whole driver market next year, because we had a very boring, silly season last year. No changes, only the Vries Ricciardo swap before the summer break, but now you have a lot of drivers expiring after 24.
Erik, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. That's Erik van Haren joining me all the way from the Netherlands. So follow Erik on social media, on Twitter at Erik V. Haren, and on Instagram at Erik van Haren. Erik, thanks again, man. Really appreciate you doing this. No
worries. Thanks for having me.
I'm Tim Hauraney. You can reach me on all forms of social media at Tim Hauraney. This is Nailing the Apex, a podcast that focuses on F1 and IndyCar. Please hit like, subscribe, write a comment. Check out our YouTube channel where you can view past episodes of NTA. I'll be back with more Nailing the Apex as the season gets closer to launch. Thanks again, everyone, for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you all later.